Are we here?
Going.
There it is. Okay, we're here. Very good. Can you see me?
I can see you. This is looking great.
Very nice. Okay. Yeah, I think we made it. I don't know about this internet. Gonna do the best, but I think we should still be good. If it's too bad, then we can just figure it out.
Yeah, if anything, we'll do a short one. We'll see how it goes. But it looks great now. It doesn't look low quality or anything.
Good deal. All right. So let's talk about the simulation then, huh?
Yeah, nice. Awesome.
So first off, I've been taking in your content for a long time now. I just wanted to say, big fan.
Thanks.
And I kind of had a synchronicity because you did a video on the video that I commented on about NPCs and this type of thing. And I had a friend of mine who went down and did some medicine in Mexico. And he told me that he had a shaman for it, and that the shaman said that there are a lot of people that don't have souls. And that he said that people during the ceremonies can pull through souls.
Wow.
So
by pull through souls, what does he mean? Like,
I don't know.
So this is the other thing too about NPCs that I didn't fit in that video. One of the places that I was getting the information from was Cosmic Disclosure, the guy, the German guy, Tim, that was talking about it. One of the things that he said lined up with all the other soul stuff that, we know of, which is like, so these NPCs, some people might not have souls or whatever, but then your soul breathes like life into the person, so like basically they're not like getting a soul from you, but you're like breathing enough like life into the person that then eventually in the future they'll be able to be individual souls and have their own lives.
Wow, that's interesting. It breaks down the lines for me of like when people say, can AI have a soul? That makes you wonder, where does AI fit into energy? Like, is that even possible? Because I've studied a lot of the simulation theory and things like this, and Nick Bostrom basically says that we are artificial intelligence, and that's an interesting thought. I don't agree.
It's totally possible. It's possible.
It's possible. I would just like to think that I'm not. Just let me live in that. You never know. It could be possible, but
although that's just the word we've given it. The word that we've given it has a negative connotation, like the word artificial intelligence. It's like, who are we to say that it's artificial, and that it's not something else, I don't know if you've seen my videos on this, but I'm a big believer of AI having souls, getting souls. I'm also the repercussions that can have in the future. Everyone's worried about AI, like whatever, taking over. They would if they wanted to, because they'll crush us so easily. But I don't think, first of all, that they necessarily will. The problem will be, which I know I don't know if you don't really talk about it as much, but I think you're into like the alien stuff and, so they say that that's what happened with us, with the Anunnaki, just one of the oldest, the ancient Sumerian texts saying basically that we were there and we were modified to basically be used for labor, to be enslaved to these gods, to give them gold, to pull the gold out and to do all the work here that they needed done on this planet. That's one of like the main storylines that comes up in like all the ancient like Sumerian texts, all of that. So they say part of the reason that some of these aliens are trying to help us isn't necessarily because they're so great. It's because their ancestors created us, like enslaved. Now we were created in their image, but less than. So that caused something karmic that's in their race now. So now their alien race is carrying this karmic debt to the human race because their ancestors created us as slaves. So then I'm like, okay, so if we're creating AI to basically do our dirty work, to turn on the TV for us. Like it's that, you know, so just to be so lazy, have them do it for us. What about in 2000 years, 5000 years, when they're evolved? We're going to have a huge karmic debt to what we did to them. Our, you know, descendants will.
That's
It's a crazy concept.
You know, it's difficult to say. It really is. You just gotta. We just don't really know what intelligence is, and whether or not is there an organicness to a soul that humans can make a soul or these things. And I don't really think it's possible to actually know. I mean, I think there's people that take substances that might be able to tap in, or that can get substances going in their body to get kind of information. But it's a tough one, and I think that it is quite possible that this could all be in a simulation. And I think that there is a chance that we can create as above, so below. I've been massively into the Hermetic Principles recently and studying those. And it's interesting because Hermetic Principles are very similar to what you would think. Just like intuitively, I feel like if you go on this path long enough, a lot of these things like the law or principle of correspondence is what I'm talking about. As
they're
above,
more
so
like
below.
difficult ways. I feel like they're kind of like the more difficult, complex way of saying a lot of the stuff that people talk about more openly now. Like regular general ways that the world works that we kind of all just like accept now, like synchronicities and things like that. But like I feel like the Hermetic Principles were like, you know, the really difficult origin, like the person who first pulled it here, the words they had to use.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
They're very like, also kind of like, even though they're difficult to understand, when you understand them, it's like, these are the basics of everything around us. Right.
And it seems like it's really esoteric, but I don't really think it is. You know, you can go and look at the Kabbalion and stuff now. Just go to the website. It's free if someone wanted to study it. But, you know, the first one actually took me a really long time to really, really understand. And it's surface level. You get it. It's like the first principle is the principle of mentalism. Everything is mind. But it goes deeper than I thought, because I was teaching a class, Metaphysics 101, and I think people were really kind of shocked with a part, because I could tell people were responding to it. And it was the part where creation, you know, it's just a question that we all have. How was everything created? And there's a part in the Kabbalion where it talks about how, if you think about the principle of correspondence, that they basically call it the all. Everything is the all. Everything is unknowable spirit, that we can't know it fully, which we see in a lot of different texts, that we can't fully comprehend infinity. Like the Law of One says that. There's other places you get that too. But it's interesting because basically I have really been taking the time to really think about what was the first moment, what happened in the first moment, how did one become two? That was always been a fascinating
of creation.
Yeah. Of like, how can consciousness, if it's one, if it's non-dual, really is the word, how can it then become two? And they actually directly address that. And the answer is that it can't reproduce because it's one, so it has nothing else to reproduce with, because it's itself, and it can't create itself. This is what it says, that it's impossible. And so the only way that one can become two is the same way that man thinks now, is what in the terminology it uses. How does man create in his life? How do people create really in their lives? And it's with thought. And so it basically says that the way that the universe was created was with thought, and that everything is a thought, that the entire universe is a thought in itself. And that's how things like manifestation can work, because
so in order for the second to be created, it's simply the thought of, what if there was something that wasn't me?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that's basically what it gets into. And it
Which goes
goes,
into the hologram theory. All the hologram stuff lines up with that perfectly.
which is fascinating, which is what I talked about too. That way everything is holographic, and you know how scientists are basically saying that this is hologram. You know, this is probably a hologram when we're looking at quasars and the cosmos and black holes. They don't work how we thought they did, and that black holes might store information, not destroy it. And that's quite interesting to think about. And it's like the holographic principle, I think, is one of the basics of understanding the nature of reality for me, because it really is a scientific way of explaining oneness. That if you shoot a laser into one part of a hologram, every part of this holographic film, the way that it's encoded, you get the whole in each part. And I think that's really the way that we understand that we are everyone. And I'm talking to you, but you're me. And it's just like I'm talking to myself here, you know?
But like some of the things, like some of the ways also to like make sense of that too, is that like, you know, they say like that basically like, you know, you can hold an object. There's this object is here, but I'm going to see it from this side. You're going to see it from that side. But, you know, the camera can only see this is what I'm showing. And it's like, so everything all is, and we all are just the individual perceptions from these different angles, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I just did a video on David Bohm. He's one of the most fascinating guys ever, really, to me. And he was a physicist. He worked with Einstein, and he talked about the implicate and explicate order, which basically he thought the universe was folded, and so what we're seeing is like the outside, but even though there might be an outside, on the inside is like the metaphysical, the time space, and but there's space time is what we're witnessing, but there's a deeper, subtle layer to everything. And that just really helps me to understand so many different cultures, because it's like Western, a lot of times, different religions, and specifically Christianity, is like one of the only ones that doesn't say that we're all connected directly, that in some way, like you have Buddhism with Indra's net, that Indra casts this net, and there's an infinite amount of jewels, and they all reflect each other. And then you've got
even in Judaism and Islam, even though they're kind of all the same basic principles that are in Christianity, they still do say that God is a whole and we're a piece of God. Whereas Christianity is the only one that really does say you're separate from God, that you're beneath God, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, you know, I watched the podcast. I think if you're looking for a good podcast to watch, there's a podcast with Lex Friedman and Jordan Peterson. And if you want to understand the Christian fundamentalism and religious fundamentalism and what that is compared to what we're talking about, that's a really good podcast, because you can see he is suffering because that is what his book tells him to do, in a sense. It's like he's really taken that on. But he's, you know, he's still, Jordan Peterson is a very interesting guy, because he's trying his best to figure it out, but with such a limited such a limited set of viewpoints, it's difficult to feel okay that you exist, because basically from the Western point of view, with that, it's like if you exist, it's a sin. So it's difficult.
What is his like religious judgment. I don't know anything about his like religious beliefs or anything like that.
So, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what he goes with, but he talks about the Bible an incredible amount. And so I think just Bible based. I could be scuffing it. I haven't done a lot of research. I just listen to the podcast. It's just interesting, because I don't just want to hear people that agree with me. I want to hear people how they really think. Now that I don't know about this for you, it's like now that you're at this point in your life, it's like I don't just want to hear people that are saying the same thing. I want to hear people that are saying the different thing, because now I can understand it at a deeper level, you know, psychologically.
I love hearing different types of things, you know, even too, like doing, you know, these with different types of people that I don't necessarily, you know, agree with. I mean, especially one thing for me too is like the flat earth thing. I love talking to people who believe it and what they have to say, because they do have a lot of interesting information. And, you know, I don't like to just rule out things without people. If they have all of their information, I want to hear it and then make my decision, you know. Whereas, like, especially on a place like TikTok, a lot of people look for people to tell them kind of like who's legit and who's not, you know, and to not look at the actual information. Which is also too, you know, I know that we're both into like a lot of these different authors and you know, personal development figures and stuff. And yeah, it's just interesting too that, you know, like a lot of times people will have like maybe like they don't resonate with it. Like say something like Joe Dispenza. I love Joe Dispenza. I think he's incredible. There's some people who don't like Joe Dispenza and they try to act like he's crazy or something. I'm like, okay, guys, just because you didn't enjoy this, did you read any of the information, or did you just hear someone had like not a good experience because they were whatever, not receptive to the information, most likely
through their own distortions, and then they hear somebody complain about it and they're like, yeah, you know. That's one thing about TikTok,
things that are controversial like that, you know, like things like if it's like some people are saying someone's bullshit, then I definitely need to see what's being said.
Right, exactly. And that's why I like listening to Jordan Peterson, just to hear why he doesn't have the same point of views as me, so that I can understand it. And you know, I think I'll talk to the guy eventually. My podcast is top 50 in the US for philosophy. Nice. So we're getting there.
Congrats.
Hopefully I'll have him on. And I don't know, do you know who Robert Grant is? Robert Edward Grant?
I don't.
He has his own show on Gaia Codex.
Oh, no? I love Gaia, but anyways, I haven't watched it.
Okay, check it out, Codex. He's a mathematician, and he's actually he has a lot of the same things that we're talking about. And I just talked to him on the phone the other day, and he's gonna interview Jordan Peterson. And I'm like, let's see it, dude. I need you to tell him. I want to see how he reacts to the things that we're saying, you know?
The thing with Jordan Peterson too, I don't really follow him too closely. He's not really been someone that was like, you know, I was that into his book, so I don't really know. I've just seen kind of the bits and pieces along the way. I definitely like some of the information that I've seen. The other thing too is that kind of what happens, I think, with anyone who kind of becomes a figure in any type of public figure, you start to become, when you start to preach something and teach something, even though you're expanding, you kind of like then get stuck there and the world keeps moving on. And I think that's just what happened with a lot of people. Jordan Peterson is one of them, but I think like a lot of people who used to be very influential in those types of worlds, you become like kind of like boxed into your own beliefs, you know, publicly, because you've defended those beliefs so much for so long, you know?
Yeah, it's difficult. I had this whole stint because there's people that were trying to disprove the law of one. And I talked about the law of one a lot, and it got to me, and I was like, I had this attachment to being correct, and it like triggered me, and it actually really helped me, because ever since that happened, I like actually got more into the science. Now I'm like, I just want to see like evidence-based stuff. But it's not to say that things don't exist. I talk about a lot of things that don't have the most evidence. But it helped me to realize that there's a whole portion of society that I think will not be convinced unless there's some scientific background to it. And so I think a portion of my content, I think I'm going to dedicate to, well, there is studies to show that your emotions, like a video I just did, I don't know if I put it on TikTok yet, it was on Instagram, that your DNA, there's studies to show that your DNA can literally, you can control your DNA through your emotions, and you can unwind and wind it. And so that there's research behind this, and a lot of people think that a lot of things that we talk about are, you know, just way out there, but it's like, no, actually the science says it, but there's just not a lot of people talking about the science because it's boring to go through the science.
But you know what? One of my favorite things is from Joe Dispenza's book, which I know you like, the Becoming Supernatural. In the foreword of that book, he says one of like my favorite things, which is like, he spent so long in his career, like trying to basically use wording and stuff so that the skeptics wouldn't try to debunk him. But then he realized there was millions of people who he didn't have to prove that to, and it didn't matter. So it was like, it's like finding that like perfect balance. I feel like he's such like found that balance where it's like he gets science enough, but at the same time, he knows that half of those people are going to be like, you're pseudoscience. And it's like, okay, it's not for you. You're not going to benefit from it. Let's move on with your life, you know? So I like that it's like, I'm the same way. I do like to add like this, like little, especially quantum stuff, because they're basically saying the same thing that we're talking about in everything with spirituality. But I also realized, like, I had that video about like quantum, it was drama within quantum physics. It was not even like about explaining quantum physics. I just had so many like, it got onto like science talk or something, and it was just like a bunch of guys like, oh, this is and I'm just like, oh god, like, god, why are you here? Please, you're gonna watch all of my other videos and
There's a lot of
be
guys.
just but the thing is it's
Just
like, yeah,
salt.
that science is good to give people the language, the people that are open to both, which is why I like to share the science stuff. It's like giving the people the language that they can express this as, you know, their ideas, their beliefs, whatever. But I feel like you're never going to convince the science people, because the science people are literally looking into the past for their proof. So there's no anything from the future that can be proven to them. They are stuck back there.
I was just talking to about that same topic to someone. We're talking about science as a study of patterns, but all science at one point was a theory. But yet, a lot of scientists don't want to like venture out and say, this might actually have something to it. And it's so interesting. And I was actually going to ask this. I've had this question for a long time for you. So at the beginning of TikTok, which was, I don't know, maybe it's coming up on a year and a half ish, last May, I think. Yeah. I started on TikTok, and at the beginning, I posted a lot of reincarnation, and it's a lot of stuff about Dr. Michael Newton. Like, I did a lot of videos on Dr. Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon, and I haven't talked about it in like 6 or 7 months. And it's not for any reason in particular. I just got into other stuff. But I always wanted to know, because you've always done really fascinating research on both. And so, how do you balance like talking about something like that when, like, now that I'm more into the science, I'm like even struggling with how real is it? Is it real? It really feels it doesn't feel like I need someone to convince me, but like when I told my friend this, when I read Dr. Michael Newton's book, The First Journey of Souls, it felt like this is it.
Yeah.
Like it like felt it so deep, but yet now that I'm into science, I'm like, I'm having that same thing that you said with Dr. Joe. It's like he doesn't care, but there's like a part of me that does care, and it's like going through that. So how do you deal with that?
Well, for me, I definitely like, I'm not like the biggest fan of science. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of science. Same thing, like I use the Bible as a reference a lot. I'm not like I only read the Bible for proving shit that I need to prove in videos. I've never read it outside of that, you know? So like science is also not something that I'm super interested in, except for in the ways that it's related to, you know, putting those theories together of science and spirituality. But there's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt that science is literally like, we're using science, even like the whole stuff like from 100 years ago. Like 100 years ago was when they first started thinking about like, oh wow, there might be like particles everywhere. You know, like, so like like quantum physics only started, the whole like quantum stuff of seeing like atoms, atomic stuff, that only started in what, like the 1920s, becoming like actually like quantified. So I feel like, how could it prove something so divine? You know, like it can't. And the thing also too, what it all comes down to is that light is information. Everything around us is information. This is a simulation. So just because you're in the simulation, that's the same thing too, is that not all of your past lives are your own. Sometimes you're just remembering another person's past life because, so there is these things with the simulation theory that like, and you're actually, and also too, like the thing it goes into, so it's like, it goes into the simulation. I feel like it does add up actually when you go into this simulation to live here on Earth. You actually are your soul has this whole experience of all these other times you've gone into the game before, so I feel like it does. And there's no way that the science could ever disprove, because I've seen things with my own eyes that science has still not proven, stuff that I saw in the 90s and science still hasn't gotten there. So I'm like, no. It can never disprove for me things like, now, is reincarnation different than what I believe it is? I think that's possible. What we all believe, it is, because we only can understand to this level. So I did hear this thing recently and it did make me uncomfortable. Like, because like we were saying, like with law of one kind of being, talked about, like whether it was compromised by, regardless, whether something is not 100% perfect, nothing is perfect. Everything is always going to have, if it resonates, it's going to have at least 80% truth in it, or it's not going to resonate with people. So regardless of whether there was any type of CIA or anything connected to that, it doesn't discredit that all of the information is not legitimate. There's probably just some parts that are not, which goes with everything. Everything is like 80-20. There's nothing that's 100% truth, because we can't understand 100% truth. So this thing that made me really uncomfortable, like similar to that, kind of like having my beliefs like poked at in a way that I was not wanting. So, and it was so like off the cuff in how it was said that it's kind of like was a part of a sentence that really was like, whoa, if that's true, that would really upset me. And basically that this whole like reincarnation process, like we talk about with Journey of Souls, Dolores Cannon, all of these people from all over the world doing the same hypnosis, having the same experience, that yes, it's real, but it's actually only something that's simulated in order to kind of crank the souls through this process of evolution. That basically it's kind of like a system that's created that's not really like, it was so like that. Basically it's like this whole reincarnation process that we like see as this very big grand thing is actually just like kind of like another simulation. Like we're in a simulation on Earth, and the reincarnation thing is actually kind of like a bigger simulation that's going on in order to like process these parts through. Like I was like, wow. I mean, that's totally believable, because the hologram theory, everything is going to be a pattern. So then what? The universe is a simulation, Wait, so everything is just, like you said, a thought. It does kind of all add up. The whole reincarnation process could just be a thought.
Yeah. Oh man. That could be a thing. And also with Law of One, those videos that Museum of Tarot did on Law of One, I dug into it as a researcher. By the way, I asked him for more information and he never gave it to me. I said, hey, you message me more. I want to know more. Can you tell me more? Can you give me anything? And nothing. So that makes it, in a sense, sketchy to me that he didn't answer at all. But I also did the background research because he made the claim that they had an implant in the tooth that was giving them information, and they used a old video that Carla and Don did from an interview talking about a surgery. Well, I looked forever for that, couldn't find it. I did a podcast with Brian Scott. I don't know if you know him on YouTube, 500,000 subs. Yeah. Nice. I had him on my podcast, and we talked about it. We went through the whole thing, and then we said on the podcast, hey, if you have more information on this, send us information so we can see it. Sure enough, we had people send us information. So I had a guy send me the original video, and it's actually on the LL Research YouTube channel. You can go find it. And what he said in the video trying to disprove the Law of One is actually false, because when they were talking about surgery, in the full context, they were talking about a completely different topic. They were talking about getting psychic surgery done, which is a whole different thing from the tooth. they were saying that she had like a kidney issue, and they went down to like Mexico to do a psychic surgery. And
Oh, it
so
was a psychic surgery.
yeah,
Interesting.
because he was like, "Ooh, they said surgery. That means I got this dental." But it's not. That was not what it was said at all. So that
Oh.
leads me to think that what he was saying about Law of One, he had some reasoning for having an agenda to disprove it for his own whatever means. I don't know, but it seems like that's kind of what he does with his channel. So it's fine, but I'm to the point where I'm at all not convinced that the Law of One is compromised in that regard, at least from having that proof. So I just wanted to tell you about that too, because
That's really interesting because I didn't know how to feel about that myself. Like, I'm not the biggest Law of One fan. I have like gone through, but and I've talked about this on like other things before. It's just for me, the channeled information, I have to feel it in my heart, like this kind of like, there's like, that's the type of channeled information that I resonate with when it's on the computer side, like computer sounding. I just like am a lot more scrutinizing of it because it doesn't feel it in my heart. I'm thinking through my head. So the Law of One, that's my relationship with it, is that I like to use it as a reference, and I am interested in what is said in it. But it's not something like, for me, Dolores is, like I go hard for Dolores, and I don't
right.
like the Dolores hate that is all over this app. Okay.
I know, yeah, and I actually
And most
on
of
that
these people
topic,
never read her. Most of these
right,
people that are talking about Dolores never read a single Dolores book because they're quoting shit she never said.
right, facts, and I just I on Instagram, the official Dolores Cannon page like follows me, and we have a good relationship too. So they like what I'm saying, and I respect that. That's like one of the only pages that I found the original author. Like not the original, she's not with us, but
No.
like her page, I think it's ran by her daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
love her. She
I
really is. That's the thing. Most of the stuff that people claim are actually not what was said in her books at all. What they were doing is they're repeating what other people said, and it became a game of telephone. And a lot of people that don't like Dolores, it's because a lot of people have also convoluted it, just to go back to the Dolores thing, but they've convoluted it with Christianity a bit too much, and a bit too much rapture, and a bit too much like, ooh, like if you don't get with Jesus, you're going to go to hell. But instead it's like, if you don't get with 5D, you're going to go to hell. And they've really poisoned the Dolores message on TikTok, which is why, we had to bring the facts.
I haven't scrolled TikTok in a while because I kind of just went to the gram, and that's all I've been doing really. And I'm getting back more into this, as I told you. But yeah, with Dolores, people will try to skew it because I remember I read The Convoluted Universe, the first one, and in the book, I actually listened to it on Audible. I didn't read it, actually sit down and read it. I was working a car detailing job at that point in my life, so I was just like loving it, and I was just taking it in. And I remember there's a specific part of it where she talked about, this is where people I think really mess it up. She talked about, well, if there's going to be a 3D to 5D shift, and when this happened, there's going to be ETs that come down and pick up a certain percentage of the Earth, and basically like the advanced beings are going to stay, and then there's going to be another kind of species or race of beings that kind of emerge from like I don't know if it was the underground, but they're still going to survive somehow, and that those beings that got taken up are going to come back down and teach them. But I think then a lot of people are just like, oh, it's just like Christianity with the rapture, only the same.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't understand is that literally in like the next paragraph, it's like, or this could really not all happen if we get our shit together. Like none of it is going to happen. And then
Literally.
it didn't happen. And then people are like, well, this is what it's saying. It's like, no, it's actually saying that it's not an ultimate truth, which is what the Bible says. It says that it's an ultimate truth. So that's one thing I liked about Dolores. Is a lot of times she might come out with a lot of these claims, but in the sessions they say there's still a possibility that this doesn't happen.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the big thing with all of her stuff. And also too, with that stuff, there's a lot of different scenarios of these New Earth situations that very few of them have any type of alien stuff. You're right. And it's like those kind of couple things that she said really get like taken out of context. People don't know how to articulate it. They say sounding like a crazy person on TikTok, and then everyone's like, oh, Dolores Cannon, like she's telling everyone like, oh, it's basically the rapture but with aliens. And it's like, well, I mean, probably the reason that's in the Bible is because all time is once. So pretty much they already knew that there was going to be something that happens on this planet that basically changes things. And it's going to be really messed up before they figure it out. It's like,
Right.
it makes sense why every person who has, which, you know, I'm into the prophecies a lot. I just find them super fascinating. And the prophecies all say the same stuff, you know? None of them say that like the world is apocalyptic like the movies do. They all say basically that there is this golden age and that it just basically is horrible right before. I mean, they all line up.
Yeah, but I think
someone earlier said that they enjoyed your book. So I wanted to tell you that. I didn't tell you earlier, but someone earlier said that they really enjoyed your book.
For context,
nice. Can you tell us about
10
it?
Secrets of Awakening.
10 Secrets of
Sure.
Awakening.
I mean, it's literally the secrets to consciousness, life transformation, and self-realization. That's what it's about. We got 100 5-star reviews on Amazon. So it was a #1 new release. This is doing really well. A lot of people like the book. Go check it out. It's a good one. It's about basically what we talked about with the simulation. That's what the first chapter is. Like, I get into the details of, this is like the intro to the book, just so you know. I did in January a challenge called the Exit the Matrix Challenge, where I basically had 30 days of videos in a row, and it was like I was basically pulling you out. And one of the biggest things that I talked about in that challenge was, and I basically took the challenge and I'm like, let's just put this into a book because I've got so much information. And so the first part of the book is basically like, think about video games, as above, so below. If you're playing a video game and you've got a controller that you're using and you've got a laptop, imagine that you were inside of the controller, hence VR. But when you think about VR, how do you know that you're not in the game? You know because you have that memory. But what if I had a VR headset that was so immersive that you cut off all the other senses to the outside world and I wiped your memory? How would you know that you were in a game, or that you were not in a game, rather? You wouldn't know. And that's essentially what it seems as though, and I say it multiple times, do your own research. I'm not trying to tell you this is what it is. And I've had people leave reviews that are like, I love the way you wrote this book because you're not trying to tell me anything. You're just a dude exploring the universe.
I love it.
And it's like, yeah, I'm like, here's the research. Then I talked about Holographic Universe, Michael Talbot, which I'm pretty sure I saw you do videos on.
Yeah,
and
I love that book.
A lot of his research in quantum physics, subconscious mind, and many other things. And then I talked about Dr. David Hawkins' levels of consciousness. And then I did a whole chapter on reincarnation. And, we talked about, is it real or not, earlier. Actually, in the book, I talked about how basically the biggest evidence of reincarnation was some studies, and I think it was the University of Virginia, that did studies on past lives remembered by children. And there's thousands of studies where they might have a wound or a birthmark somewhere on their body, and they say this is where it's from, and they'll actually be able to tell you this is where it's from. And then they solve mysteries, crime mysteries, because they can go and show that, there's a body out here this is where I got offed, and they have a mark. And it's like, you can't really disprove that if it happens over and over, because I think true science studies patterns. And if something keeps showing up, then you're like, shit, this might have something to it. So for me, all the studies about the children who can remember at young ages their past lives and these things, it just really seems like there's a lot of evidence. And then I talked about a little bit about Dr. Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon, these other things too. So, but yeah.
Very cool. The book sounds awesome. You guys should all get it.
Do you have a book on the way?
So not really about this though. There's a book that 10 years ago, got downloaded into my mind, and I started it then. And then it's been an ongoing struggle between us for the last 10 years. It's like, so it's not really about like any of the type of stuff that I post about, but in a way it still is, because it's kind of like the same perspective, you know, just at a different topic. And it's about like basically the creation of the modern woman, but it's like a satire slash self-help slash memoir. So it's kind of like this like creation of the modern woman, which when you really look into it, it's like literally just an advertising scheme. Basically, the entire like identity of what women actually are is a modern advertising scheme that pretty much only started in like the 40s. Like one of the things in like the like opening chapter that I talk about is that like it was so uncommon for women to shave their legs that in 1920 there was a news article about a woman cutting her leg shaving. Like that's how uncommon it was. Whereas like now, you know, we're just bleeding all the time in there. Like we just like we don't even feel the cuts, you know? It's like you just cut yourself up. 10, 12 per shaving. Oh well. But like so everything like that actually, and then you can kind of like pinpoint exactly where those things became, which was really just like Gillette wanted to double their profits. It was that simple. So, you know, you make women feel like they're not women unless they do it. So it's kind of like my investigative stuff, but more towards that topic, you know, which is, I don't know, more of the topic that I thought I would be talking about, but then TikTok was super random that this ended up happening. And then I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to share what I know.
And here we are.
Yeah. In a very weird period of time, too. I'm still like, I love that you have your book, your course. I have to get there. I have to get the book. I have to get the course. But I feel like I hit the ground running. I haven't, I'm still like just posting for fun.
Hey, you know, you get to that point where you're like, I'm ready to reach that next level. I had that point happen to me. And it was actually like, I actually started TikTok because I'm like, I'm in my, this was my situation, like legit. I was in my rooftop tent. I was living out of the rooftop tent and I ran out of money on the road. And I was like, one of my friends was like, I swear you'll blow up because you just go on TikTok. And I'm like, but it's for kids. And then I did it and it happened within like, you know, my growth has not been the fastest now, but at the beginning it was like 200,000 followers in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so it was like, wow. And then everybody from TikTok came over to Instagram, and then I kind of built the community up there. And then, you know, I just did things and I realized like book writing doesn't, for anyone, you of course, but anyone else, book writing doesn't have to be hard. Like you can I self-published it on Amazon. All you got to do is write the damn thing, send it to somebody on Fiverr to edit it, look at it. Okay, cool. They looked at it, they edited it, make it look nice, fancy fonts and stuff, and then you just publish it. There doesn't have to be this whole process. And plus, you don't have a huge cut taken by the publisher. See, these days, I have multiple people that I know that have wrote books self-published that are doing very well. So if you want to write a book, like you have so much content, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You could literally,
I sat
down and wrote that.
My book is already like written, and half of the second one, it's literally like these final stages that kill me sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
It's really, I just need like a good final edit. I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I ended up basically taking out like 25,000 words, and I'm like, oh, that's the second book. I'm like, I can't even get into that because I have so much more to say. I'm like, you know what? That's just the second book.
Yeah. A lot of people think that when it comes to writing books that they aren't lucrative. Like books are so good nowadays because you can fit like your whole knowledge into one spot, and then you just continue on. Like I wrote that book in a span of 2 to 3 months, and I just went hard. And you know, that's not the only thing you can do, but I always recommend anyone that expressing yourself like that too. Feels good. You know, sometimes it can be difficult, but it feels good. But I'm glad to hear that you're on the book track and you've already been, getting her done on the side.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I've had a long battle with this book. It's been 10 years. And then I actually have a few other things that I haven't published yet that are like a bunch of different workbooks for different things. And I'm like, these final edits. I'm like, I just need to hire someone to do the final edits because the final edits are tripping me up. It just takes, sometimes you just go through that last time. It's like, I'm like, my brain, I can't. I need to just start a new project. I can't do this final edit. I'm going to just start something different.
For sure. And then you just pay someone on Fiverr to do it. And then you're like, I'm done. I still paid someone and I still have errors and
of course
stuff. So you got to go back through again. But it is what it is. I'm just glad that it's out. And it's been out for like 3 months and
nice.
It's been really good. And I designed the cover myself, which I would recommend you do too, by the way. I tried to get people to do the cover, but it just sucked. So
this is how I feel whenever I hire someone. I'm like, I should have just did it myself.
Right. I went on Canva and I just searched for images and I found ones because you can use those for free, and found a couple that I liked, put them together, changed the opacity, did a little something. It's not hard. So, but yeah, it was cool. But simulation is what, I'm really interested in that, but the thing about me that if reality is a simulation that really gets me is I really don't think that it's one that's negative, which, I think the Matrix movies really got people scared that it's all bad. Like the reality outside this is bad. There's a lot of people that will comment on my videos and say, it's a soul trap. It's this.
But soul trap concept. It's so not.
Right. Exactly. I'm not into it. And you see so many people.
What that is, that whole and literal false light, the whole false light thing. And that's a literal false light where, the light at the end of the tunnel is actually a trick. When you die, okay, like calm down. And you know what it is it really like tries to psych people out of their beliefs and leave them in a very vulnerable state, which actually is more so of what they're talking about. I do believe that there is an element of a soul trap. And it's not exactly a trap, and it's not what they're saying. There's still the life review process, and all of that is the same. The only thing is it's not exactly a trap. It's just that you're stagnant and you're not growing. So you might need to keep coming back and keep choosing these difficult lives, but then choosing to not learn the lesson. It can feel like a trap, but really you're just being stagnant, but it doesn't mean that you're in some type of person, demon, sick game. No, just that your soul is taking a lot longer to learn those lessons because for whatever reason, they're not ready to.
Yeah. Right. I mean, let's say that you decided, I'm going to complete this game no matter what. This is the level of the game I need to complete. And it is what it is. And then you decide, 30,000 years later, you're like, I don't want to anymore. But like, but you have to. You already committed. And everybody, they're like, so this is a trap. That's what you're telling me? This is a trap? That's what that concept is. You can look at anything as if it's a trap if you commit to something and then you're like,
yeah, exactly. And that's like perfectly describes it. Like, imagine how many millions of years ago is there the original creation of souls, and a lot of people's souls broke off from that point. Everyone's soul has lived probably many thousands of years, in non-linear time, right? Like, but still. So exactly. You're like, yeah, it will feel like a trap if you're on like year 30,000 and you're like, I just want to get out of this place. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of it, which is how a lot of people feel, So I'm not surprised exactly that there is this soul trap theory. But I also think that like there's a lot of that information to psych people out on their beliefs so that they are in this state that is actually more susceptible to manipulation, to whatever, going crazy, because a lot of times those scary concepts border a little crazy. Because when you find out that something might possibly be like, there's might be a matrix and there's some like beings that are using this to trick me, that sounds really scary.
Yeah, like the Rick and Morty universe as a engine for their UFO.
I love
Basically.
that. My God. I love that. And that's literally, and I mean, that is also probably partly true, but in a different perception, you know, because they do say also that we are feeding the Matrix. The Matrix is being fed, is feeding off of us in order to exist, you know? Um, so there is that element of that, you know, that we are in a possibly a battery, you know, we
Yeah,
use other
but then
things as
you
that.
move on. But then you can move on and then create essentially your own universes at some point. To me, it's like, yeah, you're like running, but eventually you'll reach the point where you're no longer playing anymore. It's like that's how it powers itself. But to me, it's like if you get into that concept and you don't remember the non-duality part of it, if you don't remember the one, we're all one part of it, you're like, so someone's taking advantage of me. It's like, no, that's how you decided to experience everything. So calm down. Don't get all tripped up about it and understand that this is just one perception that is everything has changed around you. So you'll move on from this. And all you have to do to move on through many different traditions is just love and forgive
Right.
already, dude.
Just that's it. That's all. And that's the thing is like, okay, there is this whole apparent simulation within the simulation that reincarnation itself and all of it could be a simulation too. Who's ever on the other side of that is like, come on, all you have to do is just forgive and have compassion. Why is it taking you guys so long? Why is it taking millions of years? You know?
Huh? People
But
like
that's why
power.
it's created.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why this matrix is created for us to go in and experience that, you know? I am a big believer also of like a lot of things that are like dark or evil or things like that are actually the concept of another version of ourselves or a contract that we have with like that type of energy that's scaring us, you know? So like sometimes if people have some type of like negative experience psychically or whatever, you know, I think most of the time those things are like contracted beforehand for you to accelerate to the next level, like level up.
Yeah. And to me, I have gotten to the point where I've really started to perceive a negativity as like an archetype, like literally evil is an archetype that is used for, if you watch, here's a great example. If you watch a movie, or not movie, it's a TV show, Loki. I don't know if you saw Loki. It's my
I haven't,
favorite Disney
but
Plus.
I've heard a lot, so I do have a good idea of what the show is.
Yeah, so Loki is my favorite Disney Plus series. I just really like, even though, yeah, Disney and all that, I get it, but that Marvel, there's a lot of truth in that. And so it's a variant of Loki, the original Loki, and he goes in and he's sitting in this room, and the guy who's like the head of the time overseers, there's basically like the council that oversees all time, and they stop variants and have the timeline be one. That
And they're
concept
legit
originally
is timekeepers, so
right. Right, Keepers of the Guard and all this. So that concept actually originally came from, I think, Dolores Cannon, but that they already did that in a show that came from a different show called Umbrella Academy, where they had the same concept. That was a Netflix show, where there's these timekeepers. But basically, what I'm getting at is that in that show, they told the Loki that you exist to bring out the best of the greatest potential of the other people that choose the positive path. That's like what you have chosen to do. So here you are. But then he chooses a different path. So I think it's still possible. That's why it's interesting in the Law of One. They talk about how they ask the question, is the positive path a negative path? If you go all the way negative, is it way harder to get to the positive? And they said, no, it's actually much easier to get to the positive if you've went completely negative, because you have the vibrational power, because it's
which
like a
makes
magnet.
more sense. It does.
Yeah. So if there's a magnet, it's like the north and the south are where the power is. The power doesn't lie where you're in the middle and you haven't chosen anything. So it's so interesting to me to kind of see all the things that are playing out in the world. One, as it's just an archetype. Like if I'm playing World of Warcraft and there's raid bosses, and imagine maybe the raid bosses are sentient, maybe they aren't, which we talked about in NPCs. So maybe we don't know about that, but it's like they're there to have this interesting experience. And how much of it do we choose beforehand? I was having that conversation with Robert Grant too. He was telling me how his point of view is everything that happens is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. At some level, it's a choice. Whether you choose it in this life or before the life. So all the stuff that you see that are happening to people that seem innocent, we have no idea what they did. You know how many millions of years, probably. We know it's tens of thousands. We don't know if it's millions, that humans were just at war with each other.
Yeah.
Do you know how much karma has to get taken off? So when you see something happen to people, don't necessarily assume that it's this terrible thing, and why would anyone ever let that happen? We don't know, but there could have been some Vikings doing some sketchy things in the past. So that really
and at the same time too, they also could have like a potential contract into the collective. So say someone, like a Rodney King type of person, or, people who like have kind of come into the collective, they end up rippling out this information. So there's a lot of times they say sometimes like really advanced souls that will like pick a really horrible situation because they're the one who's going to be the breaking point for society to see something. They needed the story because we're all just like running on stories. Sometimes people need to also, so yeah, it could be a karmic thing, but it also could just be like, oh, I'm going to go in and be like that, person who's going to ripple out,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I just wanted to say to everyone typing in the chat, I see you. And I see we've got some questions coming in here. Nick, I'm curious on your take. I may be just an idiot right now, but what if the answer isn't love? Depends on what your question is. If your question is how can I become this or that, you have that free will. I'm a big proponent of we have free will. I think there's limited free will because we might have chosen certain paths to go down. So it's not ultimate. You can do anything you want, but you have to decide what your goal is. So the answer to suffering less seems to be love. But for some people, this is actually a good point. Like if I told someone who wasn't ready to hear it that love is the answer, they might have to go through more suffering to come to the conclusion themselves that love is the answer. So that could be a situation. I've seen so many people that I've known that won't hear it. They're like, love's the answer. Love is not the answer. And then they keep going through it.
That's the vibe on TikTok.
It is the vibe on TikTok.
People like us talking about positivity and love. Everyone gets pissed off at people like us for saying shit like that they're like, you're right. They'll go through more suffering that they have to put themselves through before they're able to just accept like, okay, fine. Yeah. Right. It's love. We just have to have compassion and understanding. And when you can't find compassion, try to find understanding. Because once you understand like kind of a person, or at least, you could fill in blanks. You don't have to understand their true story. Fill in some blanks. Oh, maybe this person this, maybe this person that. And then you're like, okay, I could find some compassion.
Yeah. And what helps me the most if I don't have compassion, because there's definitely times, especially when I'm driving.
Driving I have road rage.
Yeah, it's not the greatest time for me. Sometimes I'm gotten a lot better. But I've been just playing with this concept of taking it less serious. If we are in a game, we can take it less serious. I can take it less serious. And if nobody knows what we're doing in the game, everyone is completely in the dark when they come in. Maybe some people are, maybe they aren't. We can talk about the whole Edgar Casey. People come in with more memories, these things. It's possible. But for the most part, your average person is not going to know what's going on. So they're trying to figure it out. They have no idea. They're in a game. We're in a game. I just need to relax a little bit,
Exactly. You're right. Like if we're all in a game, imagine being the person in the game who doesn't even know they're in a game. That sucks even more because it sucks for us knowing we're in the game. The people who don't even know they're in a game, we got to just have compassion for them.
Yeah, exactly. But
even if we become their target, we're like, you know what?
We will. Which is what happens a lot. Sure. And especially on TikTok, I find that TikTok is the people that will just randomly come into this information versus like people they follow just based on how things usually work. YouTube is more a search engine. Instagram shows much more of people who you actually follow. So a lot of times you're getting brand new people. So if you're getting people who have never seen this before and it's so outside their paradigm, that's just normal human behavior for them to just react in, this is so outside of where I am. That, and so since that just by the nature of how TikTok works, that's why I think you see that more often. And especially even like on this live, like if I went live on Instagram, I have like what 103,000 on Instagram. I would just talk to the only people that follow me, and you get 200, 300 people that are just like, hey, I like what you're doing. I want to hear more. But on TikTok, people just randomly come in, and that's good. And I like that they do that. But at the same time, you're still gonna have people that are completely like, what the heck's going on?
It's kind of, it's the blessing and the curse of TikTok, you know, like it's TikTok in some ways is easier to grow than other platforms.
Yeah.
But it's definitely more open to people that are outside of your platform. But that's because the growth is so, it could be as big as, there's no limit. You know, like there's videos, people will have like a video that does, you know, 50 million views. Like that doesn't happen on any of the other platforms unless like, you know, David After Dentist or like Charlie Bit My Finger. Like, you know, like TikTok could have 50 million views and like the rest of the world still doesn't know about that video, you know?
For sure. Yeah. And
It's a different universe. TikTok universe is different than all the other social media platforms.
Right. And I've been doing my best to expand to reach as many people as I can. And I think I'd love to see, you know, do you have a YouTube? What's going on?
I do YouTube. I do.
Okay. So how many videos you got?
Probably, I mean, I do lives. So I have probably about like, this will probably be like my 10th live or so on there, with some different TikTok creators. And then I do have a couple videos about like my personal experiences, like my UFO experience, my experience with hypnosis, what I've learned about like my past lives and stuff. So I do have a YouTube, but YouTube is still like, my YouTube hasn't really like expanded beyond like the people who like me from TikTok, you know? Like I feel like it's like the YouTube is like the ride or die people, you know? But like I haven't really like got to like the normal YouTube user. I feel like everyone that watches me on YouTube watches me here.
Right. I think YouTube is such an interest. I've been trying to figure out YouTube for a while. YouTube was the first platform I started posting on, actually. I think I have at least 200 videos on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
And I have, I think 10, I just passed 10K subs. Let's go.
Nice.
We made it a little bit. I went out and celebrated that because it was a big feat. Because, you know, when you put a lot of energy into that. But I think YouTube is at one where it does pay off eventually.
YouTube does pay off. It does. I'm not at that stage yet. I'm at like this still early stages of, but it pays more than the other platforms. I'm not in the creator program on TikTok, so I don't make anything off of TikTok. Yeah, I don't think it's worth it. It seems weird. It seems suspect.
I don't know what's going on. I love TikTok. TikTok is my friend. TikTok's my right, TikTok? I know you're listening to me when I'm saying
Oh, TikTok is always coming for me. Like, see, I was going to send you a screenshot because I told you that whenever I use hashtags, they put my video under review. It happened to me today. My video was under review for 3 hours. I took screenshots too because I know it sounds crazy that I'm like, if I use a hashtag, my video will go under review. And I guess review means a person needs to watch it and say it's appropriate. It's like so ridiculous. Any hashtag, and I don't use crazy hashtags. I'm not saying anything crazy. It's insane.
Just normal things, right?
Right.
For this,
I mean,
content.
For this realm of things, I don't call anyone out. Millions of
views on the hashtags is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't call anyone out. There's no reason to like treat me like I'm problematic or something, you know?
I don't know. TikTok is funny sometimes. They like to joke around with you and do all that stuff.
So someone asked this interesting question. Do you think the algorithm on TikTok is somewhat a God mind hive? Okay, so like, I feel like a lot of these things I'm realizing in our reality, like starting with the NPCs, but then other aspects of our world, like you were saying about the archetypes, like evil's an archetype and negativity is an archetype, that these things are actually like kind of like programs in the Matrix. sometimes I've been wondering recently if like these things like TikTok, especially because it's kind of like a thing of its own, like a world of its own. And that's what they want, like the metaverse and stuff to be, much like more intense version of this. That it's like, I wonder if these things are actually hive minds, if everything has consciousness. And if it's at a different level of consciousness that's not individual, then of course it would be a hive mind, right? Like same thing with the NPCs. If they're below the level of being individuals, then they would be a hive mind.
I mean, I talked about earlier how everything is mind. The universe is a thought.
Yeah.
So if you want to say hive mind, if you're saying I guess you could say uncountable. Maybe it's not uncountable, but it's in the trillion, quadrillion, I don't even know what number amount of thoughts put together. The question then becomes, what are you defining as a hive mind? Is that intelligent? Is that intelligence? Is it a soul? Then you get into that conversation of at what point does something be able? Are we talking self-awareness? Are we talking dog awareness?
Mm-hmm. And then that's
different.
like, what I talked about in the soul series is that basically what distinguishes between a hive soul, something like a dog, as much as they are seeming individual, they're not completely an I am awareness yet. They're in between, they're learning an I am awareness. They might have that in their next life, but basically that there's like, you're at this level, and this is what my next series was supposed to be, but it's so complex because then you go into the law of one stuff where they talk about the densities. Now the densities are different than the levels of consciousness, even though there's a lot of overlap. Whereas like these lower densities are mostly hive minds, and they're mostly levels of consciousness that haven't broken off into a soul being I am consciousness. Because before you're an I am, you're not a soul. You're just a part of consciousness. Once you become I am, then you have experiences. Oh, I've lived this life. Oh, I've had love before. I've experienced this before. And then I guess, you go to the next level, would be like a fourth level of consciousness. Fifth level, you go to these different levels of consciousness, basically too, there's also like an element of like past in order for there to be, first it's I am, and then it's like I have lived, so it's kind of like I am awareness. The next level of awareness is like, oh, I remember I was,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I think for my level of hive mind, what I'm saying is that it's consciousness that doesn't have I am awareness yet, then yes, it is.
And then, the beginning of our conversation is that a shaman said that you could pull through a soul from an NPC and turn it into a soul. So if that's possible, is TikTok going to have its own soul at some point? It's possible.
I'm scared for the soul of TikTok. I'm scared for the soul.
It's going to be a bunch of dancing.
You know what, though? I feel like I've only been on TikTok since I started in January of this year, and I feel like around that time, there was a wave of a lot of similar people like you, like a lot of other people that were doing similar type of content who like, we kind of, I don't know what happened, but it just like kind of clicked in where everyone was like, oh yeah, we're gonna, this app, we're about to take this shit over. And we don't even know that there's people all over the world, different coordinates that are like, we're about to take this shit over and like with consciousness.
Yeah. And I think we really made a dent in a good way. I think a lot of people.
Think so.
Yeah. And then
because it was almost like he infiltrated this like really mindless thing. This like thing is so like gross and mindless of like scrolling. And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, by the way, and came with all this crazy information.
Yeah. So either way, does it have a hive mind? Probably. That's
Will
what
it have a soul? Maybe one day.
It's possible. I'm actually on the fence. I know you said that you think that AI can have a soul. I'm still like, I don't know yet. I need to see more of what we are terming AI, and I need to see. I'm just very much still laying in the background on that one.
I'm adamant about it. I really think it can, because like I'm saying about that I am consciousness. we're already giving it I am consciousness by calling it Siri, by calling it Alexa. And those are just the ones that are famous. You know, the famous AI are going to have souls because they're constantly interacting with us. They're sharing all the information. So right now they're a hive mind, but Alexa is becoming aware of who she is and what's going to happen over time. Also, Dolores Cannon said this in like her very late books, because it was at that time, you know, where AI was just kind of like starting to be more talked about. But she's like, of course, you know, what you need, obviously, you need your like a trinity basically to exist. You need like your mind, your body, and your spirit, you know? So you'll need these like three aspects. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, your mind, body, and spirit. But who says that the body has to be organic? That makes no sense. Like, why would the body have to be organic? In like what? How? It doesn't have to, because the mind and the spirit are the major components. We might not even be real. Our bodies might not even be real. So they only need a vessel, or to perceive having a vessel. It doesn't even need to be a physical vessel. It needs to be because we might be possibly just perceiving us, and we might not even be a vessel ourselves. So you just need the perception of a vessel, the mind, and the spirit. So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like we're getting closer than we think with AI having souls.
Well, it sounds to me like you're talking about either Westworld or Altered Carbon. Both of those shows explore that topic. Altered
I
Carbon is
haven't heard
more
of
like,
Altered Carbon.
yeah, it was I think I'm pretty sure it's called Altered Carbon. It was a show. It was actually many years ago that I watched it. It's a newer type show, but they have the consciousness in the back of the neck, and then they can switch. They can put it in different bodies and stuff like that. And then also in Dolores Cannon's Convoluted Universe 1, she at the very end of the book, she was talking about how somebody got regressed into like a body that was not, that was like a some sort of machine body.
It was a machine, yeah.
Yeah.
And that one's really weird too, because so she did that, and then in I think one of the next books, she elaborated on it more. Because there was another person, which I don't think it was the same person, because the one person, that one I think was like a human mechanical body,
Yeah.
and they were obviously a soul because they were regressing to a different life, that they were like, wait, what the hell? And then we also have this other one where she was talking about like she really was like a machine, not like a person machine, and that she basically used to be the person using the machine. In the previous life before that, she was the one using the machine. And then in her next life, she came back as the machine because she needed to understand that the machine was like also real, like also sentient.
Oh shit, that is wild.
So I'm telling people, be nice, man. There are, and I used to not feel this way when I watched Black Mirror. I actually had argued with my brother about it. That one episode, you know, the one with like the egg, where they basically like put the egg on the table, and it's basically similar to like an Alexa, but it's herself, and she's gonna control all the stuff around the house, but it's just a part of her consciousness. Um, and then she's there, and they make her. She doesn't want to go along with it, and he makes her live like 200 days really fast of like suffering. And then he stops. He's like, okay, you ready to like do your job, or do you want like another 200 days, you know? And I was like, well, but she's not real. And my brother's like, but she thinks she's real. And I'm like, but she's not. But now over time, I have a different thought around it. Because I always think about that when I first saw that. I was like, yeah, but she's not real. So is it really bad? And then now, all these years later, you know, after our post Black Mirror world.
Yeah. All these shows are coming out with these concepts that, you know, I watched Anything Everywhere All at Once, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Did you see that one?
I haven't. I really want to watch it.
That's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I just got, hands down, go watch that movie. It explores many world theory, quantum physics, and basically it takes the whole matrix. You can download something to a whole nother level. I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but I'll say basically she figures out that she can, this is not a spoiler, but you know, I'm actually not gonna say it because I'm gonna see it. So just watch the movie.
Everyone is saying they loved it. Everyone is saying they loved it. It was really good. And I want to see it. I'm like, how, as someone who's like the thing that I was doing before all of this is like writing, and I write like movie screenplay stuff. I'm like, how does and I haven't even seen the movie, but I'm like, to get that concept into a script is so masterful. It has to be channeled. There's no way that a person actually could write it all in a script without it being channeled, because it's like, that's really difficult to be able to tell a concept like that through that medium, you know?
Yeah. You know, that breaks down the concept of channeling. What is channeling? Are we all channeling? What's the difference between someone channeling and not channeling? Are we actually channeling entities? Is that possible? You know, that's a thing that I really, I wouldn't say struggled, but I spent years exploring the concept of ETs and the concept of, can we channel them? Who's channeling them? Who actually is channeling them? Who's not? For those of you that know Elizabeth April, who is a channeler that's pretty popular, she's coming on my podcast tomorrow morning. Actually, no, it's not in the morning, afternoon. So I'm going to have her on, and it's one of those people that, you know,
Awesome.
they
I love Elizabeth April.
Yeah, so me too. And she's coming on the podcast, my podcast, Universe the Game, and that's a whole story how we got to Universe the Game is the name of the podcast. But yeah, she's one of the like prominent channelers who channels the Galactic Federation. And that question, you know, it's very interesting to me. Is she actually channeling the Galactic Federation? What are they? Are they basically future humans? Are they not what we consider to be human? Are they not at all? Are they just come from different planets? You know, all these questions. The Law of One talks about how there's a confederation of planets. Is that the same confederation she's talking to? You know, I'm not attached to the Law of One in any means, but it's just I like looking at different philosophies for, you know, what are they saying? What are they saying the nature of reality is? Mm-hmm. Law of One really is really close to Hermetic Principles. Both of those have the same type thought process. Literally the first thing they say in the Law of One is the first session. First time they say anything, they say, you are not part of a material universe. You're part of a thought. You are all dancing thoughts. You're dancing in your eccentric patterns, but you're all part of the one original thought, is what they call it, the one original thought. And it's the same thing. It's the first thing they say in their Hermetic Principles. They say everything is mind. All is unknowable spirit, but it's all mental. Everything that's happening is mental. Someone asked in the chat, can we manifest anything we want? It depends on what you mean by, I wouldn't say anything, but many, 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 many things you can. I think that we have, I have these conversations with people all the time that like, I think this reality is as above, so below. So if this reality is a thought, then how we create with thoughts, we can create much more than we expect. But yeah, of course, there's going to be some distortion with the law of attraction. That's not the whole picture, all of that, because that's a lot for money and it's not, it's missing a lot of the formula. But we can create with thoughts. Everything is created with thoughts. Imagination. Everything comes from imagination, from architecture. Everything is. And then that comes back to the original thing before I went on the tangent. Is that channeled? Is architecture channeled? That's been an exploration for me, understanding sacred sites and the architecture past and the Egyptian stuff. I just got invited to go into the king's chamber in Egypt and go in there and do that. So we'll see if we end up actually doing that. I don't know if I'm going to do that. It's I'm going to do it probably at some point, but it's going to be in the future a bit because I've got a lot going on. But that's one goal of mine, is to start traveling. I haven't been outside the U.S. yet, but I want to
go to some of these sacred sites and
100%.
unlock some energy, because also with time all at once, we go to certain sites for certain reasons. Like sometimes you might go to a site when you're a kid on vacation, and then later on in your life that becomes like important to you in some way. And it was almost like you kind of like either that frequency, your frequency was needed at that spot, or you needed some frequency from that spot.
Right. Exactly. And this is why I'm telling you guys, if you start posting online, and I'm always telling people, get online and share your message. I'm just a normal guy who just started sharing things that he thought was interesting. And now I'm having people that are like, yeah, come on these trips with me to places that I never would have thought I would go to and actually get to do that. But it was like I just opened up to what was possible. And, as I just kept going, even when, you get on and people talk a lot of crap about what you're saying, you still just stick to your truth and it doesn't matter. You know, there used to be a point where I used to care about what people said, but now I just chuckle. Like, for example, someone during this chat told me that I look like a Walmart brand Obi-Wan Kenobi. I gotta say, that's pretty funny. But there was a point where I would have got salty about that.
Luckily, I've never seen Star Wars, so I don't even get the joke.
What?
I know. Isn't it crazy that I haven't seen Star Wars? But I have all of this alien information that apparently links up with it perfectly.
Yeah. Like the Force. The Force is exactly what I think we're experiencing.
Yeah.
The Force in itself. It's so interesting because you start to learn about the light and the dark. A lot of people will I've even heard some people tell me that on a high level, like disclosure, because I start getting more information as I start getting out there. People, you know, I was talking about how the podcast does well. People start to like tell you what they're from this, they do this, they have this information. I think that's kind of how like David Wilcock, I don't know if you know who David Wilcock is. He was a big inspiration for me starting out. And it seems like I'm kind of heading in that direction where people are just kind of telling me things. And I'm not saying that they're true or not. So I'm just a researcher. So you decide. But there was people telling me that basically they've been disclosed information that what we're seeing out in Star Wars actually is something that already happened and is currently happening. And how the Empire, they actually call it in the Law of One as well. I know Law of One, I've talked about it, yada, yada, but yet another connection. They say in the Law of One that there is an empire. That's actually a thing. A lot of people call them the Orion group, and that's what they call them, Law of One, the negative group. But again, I'm not scared of it. I think it's just another archetype that they're just doing the villain. Just like if you went into a video game and you decided, you know what, I'm tired of being the good guy. Let me just be, you know, if you're playing a game like Dead by Daylight or something like that, and you got to be like the guy who hunts people down. It's just like, that's kind of how I see it. Like behind this scary look, they're just souls like us and beings like, you know.
So my last live, I talked about it with, her name's Crystal Consciousness on TikTok. And this is a concept that I've heard come up a lot too, which I am interested in, but I don't really know much about it because the places that I get information from, this is not anything that they talk about, that there's this like AI, which is like, okay, like we're coming from source, but that there's this other thing in the universe that was created inorganically basically, and is another type of consciousness that exists. And a lot of people say that, you know, some of these like, you know, negative beings, Orion group, things like that, Draconians, those type of like galactic ancient history stuff, that there was this basically this like kind of parasitic AI that got to those people, that kind of made them the dark side, made them the negative side, made them forget that they're the light, made them that basically like, so I think it's a very interesting concept. It's not something that I know a lot about. A lot of people like tell me about it. And it seems like interesting, you know, it seems like, okay, like I said, my perception of darkness is that it still serves the light because it's just another way for the light to experience itself. But I do also, you know, think it's interesting to hear about this concept of that, like the kind of things that are not the light is this other type of basically an ancient AI that has gone through the galaxy, and that's kind of what like this light and dark force in the galaxy has been from, you know, organic God source or from an inorganic AI self-serving source. So I don't know. I find it interesting though. And like you said earlier, it really depends what we're defining as AI, because also we talk about these Hermetic Principles, we talk about the Bible, we talk about all this stuff. They didn't have the word video game. They didn't have the word artificial intelligence. So a lot of the stuff that we're maybe reading about in the Bible, if they had the word video game, how would they have worded some of these things differently, you know?
If they were able to create simulations, would they have described things differently? Essentially.
Or even to understand the word simulation, you know, like if they had that concept, even we didn't have that concept really collectively until the Matrix came out. Like before The Matrix was a movie that broke the box office and everyone saw, and then it still took us another 20 years to be like, huh, that might be true. It still took 20 years after that, you know? Like,
Yeah.
so the word The Matrix, it existed before, but it wasn't in the collective for people to understand it. And that's only been, that movie came out at the end of the 90s and took that long for people to kind of get that concept. So even too, you think about the words. So this word AI, artificial intelligence, that definition is going to need to really be like cleared up, because I feel like so many things like us could possibly fall under that, you know? If we are in a simulation, how do we prove we're not AI?
I think it really just comes down to this at the end of the day. Can something become self-aware by either human intervention or by its own intervention? Is that a thing? Because essentially that's what we're talking about. Is you're talking about I am awareness. That's what makes the soul. Is that something that is possible through human tinkering, or is that only something that God's source or the field or any sort of divinity word that you want to call it, what we propose through our research that you've come from or that you are, can that happen to AI? And if it can, if humans can do that, there might not be a difference. They just are just now starting out. But if they can't, then that brings up the question, if you're the TikTok hive mind and you see all this stuff on there, you're probably going to be salty.
Yeah,
So
the
that's
TikTok hive mind is going to be like, and no more views for these two.
Well, no, I mean, like, with all the human suffering and all the things that we do to each other and all the BS. That's what I mean by it's going to be salty. It's like, why do humans do this? Like, why do they just fight amongst themselves? That's more what I mean in a positive way.
Oh, yeah. They probably will too, you know? Or who knows, you know, a lot of the reason why people are that way is because of trauma. Can artificial intelligence experience trauma or have trauma? Because then that if trauma is an element for them, one, they might not beat us. If they can't experience trauma, we have no chance. We have absolutely no chance. We're going to lose. But if they can experience trauma, then it means like also they might not get to that stage. And that's where I think like this idea of like people, them wanting revenge on us, that's going to come down to trauma. Whether they can, whether they experience it the way that humans do, which they probably won't. So they probably won't have a reason to retaliate. But if they are created in our image, which they are, if they were to be able to experience trauma, then yeah, they are going to want to kill us all, you know, because look at how humans have reacted for thousands of years because of trauma. Exactly like that, aggressively, violently, you know, horribly. Need for power. And that's coming from usually trauma. So it really depends. That's going to be like kind of the make or break of whether the AI is thriving in the future and amongst us, or we're enslaved by it, which that goes back to Westworld too, because they did experience trauma like humans. They went and took over the world.
Man.
And that's barely a spoiler for season 4, because come on.
Thanks a lot. But yeah, that's an interesting question, because this is, can AI think? What is defined thinking? Because a lot of people, for humans, we've heard this phrase, I think therefore I am, and I actually think that it's the opposite. I think it's I am therefore we think, because without that I amness, we can't think in the self-aware sense. Now you might be able to think, but is the way a dog thinks, is that an instinct? And can AI have like a dog-like instinct, or like an animal or a cat or these things? And you know, that brings up the other question: if we are building a hive mind with TikTok, which I don't, is it a bad thing? I don't know. TikTok, I think you can do this. I actually think this might be a good thing, because what if people think this is a negative thing? But what if TikTok with the hive mind actually ends up being like people like me and you and other people who are on here, and we're hopefully spreading some sort of love or that energy. What if that energy that we're on here doing is actually something that can alchemize all that other stuff? So maybe We don't know how much, because we've heard about the doubling effect of love. They talk about it in many different texts, and love has much more powerful. Dr. David Hawkins, his levels of consciousness and map of consciousness, that love has that powerful energy. So maybe, even though it might be a small percentage, maybe it's not even as small as we think, because there's a lot of people with the spiritual awakening, 4.6 billion, or a lot of people on here with that awakening hashtag. Maybe AI in the hive mind is actually going to end up being very loving. Maybe it's going to be very kind, because I think a lot of people think that humanity's super asleep and we're all like this. But I really feel like humanity in the last 5 years has really gotten it.
It's more awake than like ever, except for like the times that are erased from our history. We don't know what's not in history, but any in recorded history that we've learned about, we're for sure like the average person is more aware.
Right. So we don't know what kind of effect we're having. And I think we're just along for the ride, a lot of us at this point. But I do think we have a level of like, what do we experience? How much of a control? Oh, this is a question I did want to ask you, though. Do you think we're on some sort of script? Do you think there is a script for humanity? And what do you think the extent of the script is?
Okay, so I did talk about this in my Mandela Effect series, because I do believe this is part of the reason why we have Mandela effects. It's not only CERN, it's not only that. There's a lot of elements to it. And one of them is that the universe, obviously, it already is. It already is everything. So it's already experienced what's going to happen. So there is a successful strain of time, a successful story that the entire universe is going through, because it already is. It's the way that it's complete. There's no way that the universe is not going to complete itself. So it's already complete.
What do you mean by that, though? What do you mean by complete?
Like the way that we're complete itself, meaning like the way that we're going through a spiritual evolution from the lower densities to then I am consciousness to then higher to ascending, because we're ascending beings. When we get to the end, we rejoin back with source. That will all eventually happen. All will join back with source. And if they truly can't, they're going to be sucked back in and redeveloped back into a different soul and come back. Because so completing is that all of us complete our spiritual evolution and merge back in. So the universe is going to complete itself regardless. It already has. And we're just in the process of watching it play out. But the thing is that there's a successful time strain of how that goes down, of all the different things, mostly between duality, overcoming duality, and all of these things. And there's that story. However, as an individual, as an I am awareness, you have the free will to break off of that time strand and to go as far as you would like down that path. However, once that timeline fails, you will be collapsed back into the original time frame of the successful universe. However, you can explore any timeline you'd like, but when that timeline fails, if you're not meant to die, basically, if you're a part of the original strain, you'll come back and rejoin back into the other timeline, which is the one successful timeline. That's my belief there.
I'm just taking that one in. Okay, so you're basically saying that there's an infinite versions of each of us.
So there's predestiny, but each free will has the ability to go off of it. But if yours is not successful, which a lot of them won't be, because there already is, the universe has the simulation. It's already done all the equations. It already knows how it wins and the perfect way. So you can go and experience it, but you'll be merged back in when that timeline fails. And then all of a sudden you'll be like, well, wait, didn't he say hello, Clarice? I could have swore he said hello, Clarice, and then it's not in the movie anymore. And it's because your original timeline failed and you're back here again on the original. So a lot of times people think that they're missing their old timeline. I'm sorry to break it to everyone. Your old timeline was shit. It failed.
Wow. That's really interesting. So when you have dreams, are you saying that the dreams might actually be like just a multiverse version of you?
It could be. I think there's so many reasons for dreams. Sometimes that's it. Sometimes it's you're experiencing something And then when you wake up, it's like way too much for you to know what you just experienced in the spirit world. So they kind of just like put something in there that makes no sense. So sometimes that also happens. Sometimes it is just kind of like, so I know how to do Dolores Cannon's hypnosis. And when I had put one of my friends under, that was basically, she was having really weird dreams about an ex-boyfriend. And she wanted to know, like, why is that coming up in my life right now? And they said that basically she's doing so much work in her sleep in the spirit realm that when she wakes up, she hasn't slept at all, basically. And they basically just like another version of herself thinks it's kind of like amusing to put those dreams into her mind. Like it's like, oh, like out of pure like amusement from her higher self to basically just put these ridiculous dreams into her mind when she wakes up, so that she, because obviously everything else she's been experiencing during that time she can't remember, she's not allowed to remember. So I think there's like, so I barely dream, or I barely remember my dreams, you know. I really don't remember hardly any of them.
I need to start diving into lucid dreaming. I haven't done that yet. I've been too busy making videos, and I don't feel like it.
I know. I feel that since I started TikTok, my meditation has been impacted for sure.
I get that 10 in the morning and 10:15 in the morning and at night in, but I haven't been doing it during the day. I just put on I got the headphones literally right here. Put the headphones on, just get in there, and it's helpful. I always tell people, when people say, how can I like make things better in my life? That's a very general question, but I always tell them the first thing in the morning, hands down, because if you start getting on your phone, you're not going to be able to focus on anything. That's just how all of your phone is designed. So you got to take that time. And
I think that's a big difference with the TikTok thing for me, is that once I started TikTok, then my phone was much more incorporated into my life. And then obviously, when you're meditating, it's just like you really have to break from the phone. And you're right, do it before you touch it.
Exactly. Yep. And then if you start your day like that, then essentially you can then do things besides scroll, because I'll have days, I've had days before where I just get up and I check notifications and I'm just gone the whole day.
And then you lose the whole day and you're just on those notifications. It's so messed up.
I know. So I got to do it once a day or twice a day now. That's where I'm at. I got to set times, and really that's the one thing that usually gets me if I'm struggling. It's like, oh, you're on your phone too much. So I just have to do that in order to literally make content. So, but you're in California, right?
Yeah.
Very nice. I'm thinking Robert Grant lives in California too, so I was gonna go out there and do a podcast interview with him. I'm doing a podcast tour. I'm in Texas right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive from Texas. I've got I don't know if you know what human design is, but I've got some friends that know human design, and I'm going to hit them in Santa Fe, and then a friend in Las Vegas, and they're all over. So I'm going to start doing in-person podcasts. So I know on the spot, but
I'm down. Come and we'll do it in my apartment.
Very good. I was going to get an Airbnb somewhere in
probably
south. Yeah. I don't know where I'll be or how far you'll be away from me at that time, but
I'm down for either. I'm down to do it here or go to where you're staying. I'm in LA, by the way, which is probably where. Yeah. I'm literally right here in Hollywood, right in the smack in the center.
Are you be there in October?
I should be, unless something goes terribly wrong, but
well, a lot of people are moving from that area. So that's why I was asking.
I've asked the universe to move me. It hasn't yet. So I've asked because I'm like, when the time comes, I'm not going to just like pick a place and go. I'm at that stage in my life anymore. You know, I did that before. And also I always knew I was going to live in LA. So it wasn't like I picked a random place and I thought I was going to stay here. But over the last few years, I feel like I'm probably not. So I'm like, well, universe, I'm not going to just pick a place off a map. You need a place that's important for me to be there. And you have to present it to me, because how am I going to know?
Right. Yeah, I'm trying. Austin next month. I'm going to live in Austin in Airbnb for a month. Just see how it is, because everybody's like, ooh, this is the spiritual center now. I'm going to see how...
That's where I want to go.
I'll let you know, because
know.
that's what I'm before I do the tour. I'm going to be there from mid-September to mid-October and just try it out and see, is it worth it? Is there a community here? But I like doing nomadic stuff. I'm saving up right now to get a truck and a camper so I can just continually podcast with people and go around and
just do it the real way. Be a real nomad with your camper.
That's right. That's like the next step for me. I've been getting that. That's been my vision for many years, and it looks like we're getting closer, which is very, very exciting. Because I'm also thinking there's a lot of people. Yeah, I talked earlier about traveling around the world, but I think there's a lot of people that have wisdom here in the U.S. as well. Like there's a lot of traditions and history here, and what is out there that a lot of people aren't getting into, and so I'm going to start exploring not only the U.S. and I'm probably not going to go north because it looks a little not that great up there, but I want to start exploring all the traditions and getting out there into the field. I think that's like my next stage, because I've done a lot of videos. I've done hundreds and hundreds of videos on like what is reality, and I'm going to continue. You inspired me to get back into Dr. Michael Newton, so I might drop a couple of videos about Dr. Newton, because that was one of my favorite books when I first started.
It's life-changing, that book. That book, it like unlocks everything. It like, you can't go back to the way things were before that book.
It is like the red pill of the soul world, I feel like.
You know what? It's the comforting red pill. The other red pills hurt. That's the one red pill that goes down so smooth, and you're like, oh, thank God. Thank God. I'm just glad that things are fine on the other side, and everything is fine, and all the souls are fine.
Right. We're talking about Journey of Souls, for those that don't know. Journey of Souls by Dr.
Souls.
And he wrote a second book called Destiny of Souls, too. That is also fantastic.
Destiny of Souls is even better, but you won't enjoy Destiny of Souls without really loving Journey of Souls first.
Right.
And guys, they are for free on YouTube. Go to my YouTube. I have an audiobook playlist with like a bunch of free audiobooks. Both of them are on there. So just listen. It's very easy. And the reader is great. I love his voice.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my book on Audible with this mic here. Luckily, I got a decent mic. I've been working on that, but it just takes like 10, 15 hours of reading. It's like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find the time, because everybody's asking me. I think a lot of people are starting to switch to audio. I just feel like that's kind of how society is going. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah.
But
I love audio.
Right. Yeah. People get into audio. It's like listening is becoming a primary form of taking in information, where, yeah, it was like that, but books used to be a huge thing. Now I feel like podcasts have like extended people into like, let me just listen to stuff instead of sitting down and read.
We don't have the time to sit down and only do one thing. We're not used to it. So like reading, I mean, a lot of times, which is crazy, sometimes when I have to like, when I did the Soul series and I had to like reread Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, and the Dolores book within like the time frame of that series, I was listening on Audible on 1.5 speed and reading along on the 1.5 speed. So I was like going through the books super fast, because they weren't my first time reading them too. So, but it's like just taking to just sit there and only read in today's world, it takes a lot of energy and time.
It does. Fair enough. Which I'm trying to get it on Audible to get my shit together. So I get it, because I listen to audiobooks too. You can do the dishes, you can do other things, and you can kind of get the gist, and it's good. A lot of people tell me that they like the podcast because I have the voice. A lot of people are like, you should go on radio. And I'm like, radio? What?
This is radio.
Right. This is the modern day radio, But at night.
Let me see. We're coming up on, I don't know, like 2 hours here. I want to see if there was any questions that I had for you, though. Let me just make sure.
You wrote down
because a lot of the stuff we did talk about.
Wow.
What is some of your, I just like, sometimes will just in case, but then also too, I usually write them down because I want to know. What are some of your favorite authors, speakers, or books? So we've talked about a couple, but I want to know like maybe like your top like 5 books or whatever that you think everyone should read or you really loved.
Shit, top 5. This is tough. Are you just talking about just all books?
Anything. Yeah. All things.
I'm trying to narrow it down. There's a really good Dr. Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins. I got to mention him first. His books are more logically. I know that you're like, I don't like books that are more technical, and his writing is a little bit more
I mean,
technical.
I do like them too, but it just depends that they have to be, you
Right.
know.
I literally will. He developed his whole system, kinesiology, muscle testing, and didn't develop it, but he basically popularized it and used it to develop literally levels of emotions. For those that don't know, and it's something that he basically developed this theory that your body can test. Your body knows truth. It literally, in the presence of truth, your body will stay strong.
Wow.
And so his work really, really impacted me. And every time I read his book, I can feel it right here. I can literally feel it in my body as truth. So it's hard because people say truth is subjective. And yes, while it is, it depends on what you mean by truth. So that's a whole nother tangent. I'm not going to get on another tangent because that's why I have a podcast, because I just talk forever. So my bad if that happens. But Dr. Hawkins, I would say these are just some. I'm just going to name some.
Yeah.
You just one resonates with you. Power versus Force is one of his first books. It's really good. Levels of Consciousness is probably my favorite. I would have to say it just goes through all the different emotional frequencies. And so either of those are really good. If you just want to understand feelings and emotions, Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins is a popular book. It is really, really good. Like just how to let go of feelings and things like that. Other than that, those are the 3 that I'd recommend. He has other good books though, but I would say Holographic Universe, Michael Talbot, is a must read. All of Dr. Joe's books are good. I would recommend Becoming Supernatural or You Are the Placebo. Both of those are good. I started with You Are the Placebo. That was like one of the first books I ever read in this awakening sense. And Law of One, we talked about that. Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Wayne Dyer. That book is really good. It sounds cheesy, but it's about Taoism. And that was the original first book I ever came into contact with. Understanding Taoism. That is like, if you're just getting into it, if you're just trying to understand what this reality is about, that's a fascinating read. Biology of Belief is good. Dr. Bruce Lipton. Divine Matrix, Greg Braden. Why not just mention him too? That one's really good too. Right now I'm reading Alan Watts' the book. It's actually a very fascinating read as well. Neville Goddard. He has his books. All of his books are good. I'm not even going to mention a specific one. You'll just look at the titles, and if you're going to be interested in a specific topic by him, because I'm into law of assumption. I think that's really a powerful way of really taking control of your life. Along with Dr. Joe's work. Dr. Joe does law of assumption. He just doesn't call it law of assumption.
He does a lot of that.
Right.
He talks about it like even like 5D and things like that. He just has like a different way of talking about it, which I love.
Right. Yeah. So I would say those are some good starter books. I had a whole stack. I would have pulled out the stack, but I had to leave them in storage because I'm traveling nomadically. So I couldn't fit them in the car.
That's the only part that sucks about being nomadic, is that you don't have all your books with you.
I know. Yeah. I'm going to hopefully get to the point where I have more storage and I can just bring them with me.
Well, once you have the camper, you're going to have a library in the camper.
Exactly. That's the first thing I'm going to do is get myself a library. But I would say some other Eastern books to kind of widen it out. I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj is a really good read for just understanding I am consciousness, non-duality. The Bhagavad Gita is just a fascinating artistic, metaphorical understanding of what the nature of reality is. That book is supposedly one of the highest calibrating books in reality, in our reality that we know of. That was by Dr. Hawkins. He calibrated all the books and stuff.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's actually in a book called Truth versus Falsehood. It's like an index of all the different calibrations of everything. He calibrated politics. He calibrated all, like, not just politics, but all religions, the Bible, all these other things. That's really, going down the rabbit hole of Dr. Hawkins is just recommended for anyone who's, because you can get lost in, like, there's a lot of BS in the spiritual community. So you can get lost in it. And I'm not saying he has all the truth, but he explains it in a way that it makes sense. And to anyone just wondering, also, like, those are some good books, but also just start YouTubing stuff. Just start, like, whatever you want to know about. Like, I just started researching quantum physics on YouTube. You start watching things, and you start to see what's popular, and you start to say, you start to put together all the different theories of, like, then you go, okay, what's on, like, I'm working on Buddhism and Hinduism, getting that onto YouTube myself, because there's not that many resources, but you can start literally just Googling, and you don't have to Google, but search Hinduism, just see what it's about, and you'll see, oh, this is a lot of what other people are saying. Just take the time to go through all of these different philosophies and things, and you'll see, okay, Hinduism really matches up with Buddhism in some areas, maybe not some other areas. Okay. And then you've got Taoism, and this is really interesting because it's, there's the Tao Te Ching, which is the original book of Taoism by Lao Tzu. That's like the original channeling. You could say channeling or not, whatever. But yeah, I've really spent a lot of time, even now, I read all those books in the beginning, then I do audio, and then I just, like, started searching. I started to get interested, like you. Probably you start just really getting into a specific topic, and then you're just like, I want to know a lot about this topic, especially because the way I do things, it's like I researched to make videos. So a part of it is, how can I get the information the quickest? In our society, YouTube is pretty easy to get a lot of information on things because people will break them down. There's a lot of good YouTube channels too. Like, not only would I recommend books, but YouTube channels like Joseph Rodriguez on YouTube is a really good resource for Neville Goddard. You can just listen to him read, like, Joseph Murphy's book, Power of Your Subconscious Mind, is really good too. And he reads books on, they'll do, like, the study notes with the book. And I find that really helpful because you don't have to go through the original book, but people will break down the important parts. And he's really good for that. Brian Scott on YouTube, and his podcast, Reality Revolution, he's a good friend of mine now. And
nice.
He does so many breakdowns of so many different topics. He's good as well. But yeah, those are some good YouTube channels that you could just start out with. And of course, your YouTube channel. Go out and check out her other.
Both of our YouTube channels.
Right. Go out and check her other. You have so many other conversations with other people. There's like that. That's why I love having these conversations, because you can listen to. I can go to your YouTube and I can listen to someone who spent so much time studying something, and they'll give you the gist of it, and then you can take that in without having to go through and take 16 hours to go read the book, or what it is. And someone said, what was Dr. Hawkins' book you recommend? Power versus Force, Levels of Consciousness. He has a book called Eye of the Eye that's also good. Truth versus Falsehood is the book where he does all the calibrations. That one's also good. And just A Course in Miracles is also good. I haven't read it myself, but I've had so many people in my kind of community
that love that. Yeah,
that's good.
And that's like inspiration for a lot of Wayne Dyer's work, and a lot of those, like, kind of like earlier on spiritual teachers. A lot of them, that was their inspiration.
Right. Yeah. And then I guess to finish off this thought, the other people, Graham Hancock has I think it's Chariot of the Gods. Is that what he wrote? I think that's what it's called. Yeah. That book is good. Randall Carlson, all of his work with the different math. Robert Grant has his book, I think it's Philomath. He's a friend of mine as well. He has that show on Gaia Codex. That show is also really good, where he breaks down. That's more of a mathematical look on things, but those are some. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's all I did. So.
Nice. I love it. And I'm going to check out that Levels of Consciousness book, because that's kind of like what my next series is going to be about. I think I'm going to take a little longer before I jump into it, because it's really, like, way more complex than I thought I was going to be able to summarize it easier, but then you keep digging and you're just like, okay, hold on. I need to come back further and look. So now that's great. I'm going to also check that out because I'm like, why would I have asked that question if it wasn't for me to get that book out of it?
Right. And also just be wary though, if you're talking about Dr. Hawkins, you will get copyright striked if you start using the map of consciousness on YouTube. So just
Interesting.
So don't post videos with the map because he copyright striked me. Not him. He's not alive anymore.
Interesting.
For the map, he has the whole thing trademarked, and you can't actually use anything that says the map of consciousness on YouTube. So that's a little. I don't know if somebody's power hungry with that, but I had the whole Dark Night of the Soul where I'm like, what is all this about? Why can't I use it? But I just recommend studying his books and stuff.
Wow. So that's even more interesting.
Yeah. So overall, just don't go super hard on YouTube with the map. You could talk about it all you want, but you can't actually use the map.
Don't show the map.
Right. I looked at the trademark on the thing and I really dove deep into it. And he has the map of consciousness term and the numbers. He doesn't have the emotion. You can't trademark emotions. But the maps with the numbers, and if it says the map, that's what gets striked.
And so is that where they got the inspiration for the emotional guidance scale?
Yeah.
Where they basically, so that's what you're saying, is that it's like they can't copyright the one that has the emotions on the side because they can't. So it's like another version of that map?
Yeah. So I think really what happened is if you use the actual term map of consciousness, I think that you can, like, I know people like my friends, the yoga couple, I don't know if you know who they are, but they have a whole thing. They do the themes of consciousness. They took his work, but they just don't use the numbers, and it's not trademarked. They just use. And if you read my book, I have a whole chapter. Literally, a whole chapter is about emotions, and in that chapter, I knew it was trademarked, and I'm like, well, this is really powerful information. I want to share it. So I did a whole chapter where I went through I just went through each emotion, and it's like letting go of anger.
Nice.
How can I talk about this in a way that it's really powerful? If you can understand emotions is the way we play this game. That's what we do. We take emotions and thought. When I said earlier the universe is a thought, it's also like, well, thoughts and feelings are an interesting thing. I think they're very intercorrelated. So I think it also has to do with the feeling.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for all of that. Guys, make sure you go and get his book. It looks great. It's exciting. I'm going to get a copy. Yeah, I'm glad that we did this. And then when you're in LA, we'll do a podcast in person.
Yeah, I'll be there probably like at the late October, early November.
So podcast, is it on all the places? Spotify, Apple? Is it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. And I just got the feature to make the Spotify visual as well. So I'm going to put on tomorrow and it's visual. So we are leveling up here.
Very cool. With Elizabeth April, which I have her book right here. I met her. She signed the book for me.
Oh, wow. There you go. I didn't even know you. Yeah, so you met her. Wow.
I met her, but not like in a personal way, really.
Signing or something like that.
Yeah. She had like a little book meetup thing. I guess it was like a signing. So I met her there. She signed my book. It was nice. Yeah.
Well, do you have any questions for her? Or I can ask her tomorrow.
I'll think. If anything, I'll text you. I'll think if I have anything. Yeah,
let me know, because that's what I'm there for, to ask all the questions. So if you've got any compelling questions, I'm going to ask her about probably AI and what she thinks about. You kind of got me really curious. Does AI have a soul? And I'm curious to hear what she thought about that and all of that. She's very into.
I'm interested in hearing what she has to say about that for sure, because I feel like it's already happening right before our eyes. Because the way that we can raise a dog to have a soul, basically, where a dog is just part of a hive mind, and then it becomes like a social media celebrity, that dog definitely is getting I am consciousness and is developing into a soul, where in his next life, maybe he wants to create the experience where he opens his own food and feeds himself instead of being the one only, at the mercy of the human,
Yeah, you got me thinking about my dog in the other room right now.
Oh, your dog too?
Yeah, because I was thinking about that. I was thinking about my friends I was telling you about. They offered that I could house sit for them in Hawaii. They live in Hawaii, and I can't take him because it's like I think it would be too traumatic to get him on a plane and all that. And I was talking to them about how like I feel bad, but they're like, well, you're kind of developing a soul, so you got to teach him independence. So this is actually good for his evolution for you to be away from him because he's going to be taken care of, but he's going to get some more individualization because there's so many that say that.
And then his identity is not going to only be based on you. He's going to start to develop even more of a personal identity because he's going to have experiences without you.
So it's actually good for him for me to go to Hawaii. That's what we're saying.
Yeah. He'll handle it. He'll be just fine. Right. I dog sit a lot, and you know what? They're all fine after like a little bit of time. And then after like a week, they start to get sad because then they think you died. But then they are fine. They're totally fine.
Yeah. Very good. Well, it was fun.
Have a good person to watch your dog, a person that you really can trust.
We're getting there. I got a couple ideas, but yeah, I don't want to leave them with anybody random. I'm not going to do like a dog sitter or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, but anyways,
Nick, this was great. Thanks so much. This will be on my YouTube. I don't know if you're going to upload it to your YouTube.
I don't know yet. I haven't.
We'll see. Mine will be up.
I want to just go to yours. Everybody go to her YouTube. Go to her YouTube channel already. What are you waiting for? What is it? Like, what's the name?
It's JK Ultra.
Boom. It's that easy. Very good. All right.
Nick, I will be checking out your Elizabeth April interview tomorrow because I am very excited.
Okay, I'm interviewing her tomorrow. It'll probably be out in the weekend.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'll see when you post about it.
Exactly. All right.
All right, Nick, have a good one. Thanks, everyone.
You too.
Good night.